Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the EIT Nuts and Bolts, today's webinar. I am Katerina Seretti, and I will be your moderator for the day. I would just like to ask our technical support to change our screens. Just give us a few minutes. Thank you very much. Great. So I'm very happy to be with you here today. You probably know that this is the second webinar in a series of 4 regarding the new call for proposals for a new knowledge and innovation community, EIT culture and creativity. So last week, the first webinar, we discussed about the EIT ecosystem, and we also shared a few information about the call with you. Today, we want to talk a bit more in detail, we want to deep dive with you about the details, the ins and outs, let's say, of the EIT machinery. And I have a few colleagues with me that will give you a wealth of information that you will find very, very useful while drafting your proposals. So a few things before we start, which I think are really important, because above all, I want to make sure that you will get the most out of this discussion. So one thing I want to ask you is please don't be shy. Ask questions. You will have the possibility to ask questions during the discussion. Please choose the Q&A button or just use the chat function, where you will be able to chat with some of my colleagues. You will also be able to ask questions during the entire webinar today. We have a bit more than 1.5 hours, so please ask your questions at any point you find this important. We've received questions also a few days ago during via Slido. We'll also receive during the day. We'll make sure to answer some of the questions during the presentations we do, but we will also be able to answer them at the end of the discussion today, where you will have with us a Q&A session. If any of them is not answered, again, don't worry, we will be able to get back to you through our website. There's a dedicated page about the call in our website, in a dedicated section about the new call for proposals. So please go and check within the next few days. You will have all the answers in the frequently asked questions page. But together with these, you will find recordings of today's webinar, the recordings of the last week, and the most important, all the presentations. So I won't take more of your time. I want to invite in our discussion my colleague Adam Rodenbacher. He's the Chief Operating Officer here at the EIT. For now, you can see Laurent, but I guess that you want to say Adam. Just give us a few minutes. Perfect. So Adam, the floor is yours. Adam will be talking to us about the EIT governance and the relation it has with the knowledge and innovation communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. Just trying to share my screen. I hope it works. So please confirm. Thank you. So I would also like to warmly welcome everyone who is participating in today's webinar. My name is Adam Rottenbacher. I'm Chief Operating Officer of the EIT. And this is indeed a truly exciting time in the life of the EIT community. And we cannot wait to welcome EIT culture and creativity on board with us. So today we will indeed take a deep dive into the details how the EIT and the KICs work. But before taking that deep dive, I would like to provide you with a higher level overview of how the EIT community is governed and managed. So you are already aware that the EIT community has already brought together almost 3,000 partner organizations in 8 KICs. You can imagine where there are so many diverse partners, sometimes with different interests, all working for a common goal. It is very important to have strong governance and effective governance systems to ensure that we actually achieve that goal. So in my presentation, I will provide you with a glimpse of how that works in the EIT community. So before I start, I would also like to note that today's webinar presentations will build on each other. So this means that I will introduce certain concepts which my colleagues will explain in more details later on. So if there's anything that is unclear for the first slide, please bear with us, but also don't hesitate to ask questions as Katerina mentioned. So I have five slides altogether. The first one presents an overview of the governance system in the EIT community, and we'll have then 2 slides each for the EIT governance and the KIC governance. So as you can see on this slide, on the left-hand side, the governance system in a simplified way of the EIT. The key strategic decision-making body of the EIT is the governing board, while the EIT director is responsible for implementing the EIT governing board's decisions and also for the day-to-day management of the institute. You can also see in italics the term authorizing officer, which is an awful term from the EU financial regulation. For the time being, it is sufficient to know that it is the EIT director who can conclude partnership agreements and grant agreements with the KICs. So in the middle, you can see partnership agreement, essentially the contract between the EIT and the KIC that governs the relations between the two. And then on the right-hand side, you can see an example of the governing bodies of a KIC knowledge and innovation community. This is just an example, and I will come back with more details in the next slides. So typically, a KIC has a partner assembly, just like for any company. The assembly is the link between the owners, shareholders, and partners, and the supervisory board and the executive team, and this is where key strategic decisions are taken. A supervisory board has the responsibility to oversee the work of the management team and the executive team, and they can also approve certain decisions. And then, of course, the KIC has to have a management team. So this is the executive functions composed of the C-level directors, of course, so CEO, COO, CFO, and collocation directors and or thematic directors. There is a large degree of autonomy for the KICs to decide on the exec structure within certain limits that I will explain. So about the EIT Governing Board, it is composed of 15 members that are appointed by the European Commission following an open competitive call and selection. And they represent the higher education, research, innovation, and business to make sure that all sides of the so-called knowledge triangle are represented. So for all of the activities of the EIT community, we have high-level expertise in our decision-making body. They are in charge of steering and monitoring the activities of the EIT. And to take strategic decisions, I have just put on the slide 4 key ones, the most important ones. There are, of course, more. So they have to adopt the EIT's work program for the next 3 years, because we operate in the 7-year framework, of course, of the EU. So we have a 7-year strategic innovation agenda for the EIT. But within that, we have triennial and annual work programs, and this is adopted by the governing board. They allocate the EIT funding to the KICs, and I will have a separate slide on that. They select and designate new KICs. So also in the case of EIT Culture and Creativity, it will be the EIT Governing Board that will take the final decision next June on which consortium will become the new KIC. And they also have to supervise the KIC's activities and take corrective measures if needed. So on this slide, I would like to be a bit more kind of detailed on 2 aspects, the funding allocation and the supervision. So on the top, you can see performance-based funding, which is a very important term, and my colleague David will go into more depth a bit later in this morning. Most importantly, we expect the KICs to have impact-led planning in place. We have an impact framework for the EIT that sets out the various indicators with which we measure whether we actually achieve our objectives. Because we are all here to create impact and deliver impact, of course, both economic one, so increasing the competitiveness of Europe, but also on the societal challenges that we address. So the planning has to be impact-based, and then the funding allocation by the EIT Governing Board is based on the actual performance towards achieving those impacts and strategic objectives. So this is how we incentivize performance of the KICs towards achieving their strategic objectives, but also in terms of progress towards financial sustainability. This grant allocation decision is typically taken on an annual basis by the EIT Governing Board, since the EIT also has annual budgets in line with the EU budgetary cycle. And this grant allocation is always decided after an annual performance review. So David will go into more depth a bit later. Then the second, I would say, most important function of the EIT Governing Board is to supervise and steer the activities of the KICs. So we have continuous monitoring activities in place by the EIT, but also by Governing Board members to follow the activities of the KICs on the operational level during the year. And we also have periodic evaluations, as you can see here, every 3, 7, 10, and 15 years. This comes from the EIT regulation. And during these evaluations, we take stock of the impact achieved. Impact is not something that you can measure on an annual basis necessarily, but you have to have a longer time perspective. And then based on the results of these monitoring and evaluation activities, the governing board can provide strategic recommendations, give guidance to the KICs to further increase the performance. And in case there is serious underperformance or, let's say, non-compliance with certain provisions or rules, then the governing board actually has to take corrective measures to make sure that we stay on the course. When it comes to the KIC governance systems, as I said, and here in italics, you can see actually a quote from the EIT regulations that the KIC shall have substantial autonomy to establish their internal organizational composition. So this means that the new KIC, EIT Culture and Creativity, can decide what sort of legal form they will take and how they will establish their their KIC legally and also from a governance point of view. However, we have certain principles of good governance that are either set out in the EIT regulation or in the partnership agreement that I mentioned. And of course, the KICs have to abide by these good governance principles. And this kind of creates the framework and the limits within which the KICs have that autonomy. So let's go through these principles. So KICs have to have transparent governance arrangements. I mean, it has to be clear for the outside world how decision-making is done within a KIC. The KIC's governance has to have a balance across the knowledge triangle, just like, as I mentioned, we have a balanced representation of research, education, business, innovation in the EIT Governing Board. This also has to be there and in place in KIC governance bodies. We cannot have a KIC governance body, a supervisory board, only from people from research or from academia, because that would be too one-sided. Then also, these governance and management bodies have to reflect diversity in other ways as well. So not only have a balance across the knowledge triangle, but these bodies have to be diverse, most importantly in terms of gender, but also from a geographical point of view. We strongly believe that the diversity of thought and experience leads us actually to better results and to excellent results. The supervisory functions have to be separated from the operations. This is a very standard requirement in corporate governance. So we also have this as a principle, of course. And board members for the KICs, but also, of course, management members have to be selected via transparent and competitive processes. And it is also very important to have independent board members who can act freely without influence from partner interests. So there has to be a balance in that respect. And typically we expect that at least the chairperson is independent from partners, and half of the members of the supervisory board of the KIC should also be independent from partners. And the last bullet point, of course, the KICs have to have a lean and cost-efficient management structure in order to act in a cost-effective way. So this is my last slide, really just to recap the key principles of good governance for KICs. So KICs have to have a balanced partnership, and this has to be there also in the governing functions. Checks and balances should be in place, so a proper separation of duties and decision-making powers between the different bodies, partner assembly, supervisory board, and executive management. Ownership has to be separated from management, that's very clear. The governing and management functions have to have a size that is fit for purpose. This goes back to the cost-efficient nature of these systems that we would like to see. There has to be a quality decision-making process in place, so always clear who takes which decisions. And last but absolutely not least, KICs have to have a code of conduct in place, including conflict of interest policies, to ensure that the KIC always acts in the interest, or the decision makers always act in the interest of the KIC, and also in the public European interest. So this was it from my side. Thank you very much for the attention. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Adam. I think we can stop sharing now. And you have nicely set the scene, actually, for the presentations that will follow. But first, I want to have a follow-up question for you. So can you please tell us how the EIT Governing Board actually works with the different knowledge and innovation communities? So I have already mentioned that there is an annual performance review in place where the EIT Governing Board actually meets the KIC management teams, and that's where the Governing Board takes stock of the achievements of the KICs in the year. We also have other interactions with the KICs in place. We typically have also on an annual basis a meeting between the EIT Governing Board and the chairs of the knowledge and innovation communities,
And this is where let's say, the EIT Governing Board, together with the chairs, they discuss matters of strategic importance for the EIT community. Then we also have a so-called rapporteur system in place. I think David will explain this in more detail. This means that every year a member of the EIT Governing Board is appointed as rapporteur for a wave of KICs, so typically for 3 knowledge and innovation communities. And this means that this Governing Board member follows the developments in this KIC more closely, so interacts with the KIC management teams and also the board more frequently during the year, and then summarizes his or her experiences and reports back to the EIT Governing Board. So this is also one practical step that we have taken to increase the interaction and also the engagement of EIT Governing Board members.
Okay, thank you very much. Please stay with us, because at the end of the discussion, you will join us for the Q&A session. And we proceed with the next colleague, Laurent Roux, who is a strategy officer in the strategy and impact unit here at the EIT. Laurent will be talking about a very important element, the financial sustainability, a strategic element for a knowledge and innovation community. So Laurent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Katarina, and thank you, Adam, and good morning to all the participants. I will also share my screen. And let me know if you see it. Yeah. No. It shows correctly? Okay.
Let's take a second, Laurent, because I think the screen is a bit frozen. In the meantime, if it, yeah, perhaps you can put it on a presentation mode.
I put a presentation, so sorry about that. So yeah, financial stability is a very important topic, and Adam touched on it briefly. But of course, for all the participants too, it's very important to understand the concept of financial stability for the KICs. And I'll go through it later on the presentation. It's in a call for proposal documents. It's also one of the key element we will use to evaluate the proposals. And what does it mean for the KICs? So for the running KICs, but also this new KIC, CCI. So it's really financial stability of the KICs is meant to mean the gradual reduction of dependence from EIT funding. And this is in the financial stability principles of our KICs that was adopted by the EIT Governing Board in May 2021. It's really an integral objective of the business model of the KICs for many years, actually, and we work with the KICs very closely to make them financially sustainable. It really also depends. I mean, KICs have a life cycle, obviously. When they set up early years, then they grow, they develop, and they go towards financial stability to be, usually they're with us for 15 years. At the end of this 15-year period, they are meant to be financially stable, maintain their activities, maintain their ecosystem. In the meantime, they've also been attracting other sources of financing from other organizations for financing the EIT funded activities in part. So that's the co-funding part, but also non-EIT funded activities that will take place inside our KICs. And these are activities, as Adam mentioned, on innovation, on education, on business creation, but also all the ecosystem activities and also the regional innovation scheme that the EIT has established across Europe. So what it means, what are the main elements of this KICs financial stability? For the KICs, it's very important to develop short to mid-term revenues from all their activities to bring in, if I can use the term, cash into their account to maintain and fund further activities. So these are in the form of usually fees. They take equity also in startup and scale up the support. They agree on revenue sharing with partners when they run innovation activities. This can also come from royalties, intellectual property revenues. So all this is negotiated by the KICs themselves with their partners when they run activities with partners from the Knowledge Triangle. And also including these the regional innovation scheme activities and the global outreach activities. So in the large footprint that EIT has across Europe. So this is for the short and medium term. Obviously, for the more longer term, KICs are also developing investment initiatives to further invest with their own funds in projects, startup and scale up the support, but also in co-investment with other organizations such as the European Innovation Council, European Investment Fund, European Investment Bank. It really depends on the maturity level of these startup, scale-up and projects that they support, depending on the amount of money that is needed. So KICS can offer this tailor-made access to finance to their beneficiaries. It's also very important for the KICS to develop strong programs. They call them asset. I think it's a term that is used in the market as a whole, to be able to attract strong co-funding from partners and also other finance organizations in these programs. And this is a requirement also of the EIT per the legal base. The co-funding rates as KICS mature and get older, the co-funding required increases. So from the start, the KICS know this. They work with their partners to achieve these increasing co-funding rates as they mature. And then, you know, it's really for us also and them to educate the next generation of participant in their programs, but also the EIT alumni. We have a large base of members, EIT alumni members that are graduates from our education programs, but also the founders and co-founders of the startup and scale up that we support. They are members of an EIT alumni community across Europe, 14,000 members. So these members are also educated in a way to look at projects really and include financial stability from the start, develop revenues, develop financial assets, and also find partners that are willing to co-finance activities for increased results and impact. This is also the goal of this financial stability aspect. So I mentioned it already, but for us, and this is also what Adam was saying in his introduction, this is really looked at very closely by the EIT Governing Board in all the interaction they have with the KICS. But it's important that the KICS develop diversified sources of revenue and financing. So there are different categories of these revenues and financing they can secure, and we look at it from a diversification perspective. We don't like KICS that are too one-sided in terms of their revenues and financing, just to prevent issues as they grow. They also expect them to have good financial sustainability planning, meaning the targets they set for themselves in terms of revenues, co-funding, financial asset, the budget, activities, and so on this planning has to be solid, and they have a great deal of autonomy in that sense. But once they commit to us with these figures, we like them to achieve them as much as possible. We also really look at short-term revenues from activities because it's important to keep revenues coming into the KIC in a regular basis, and we like them to develop financial assets for the mid to long-term revenues. And finally, it's important for them to negotiate correctly with the partners. It's around the activities they have to make sure that the KICs themselves benefit financially from the launch of new startup, the additional revenues that are created by products that are put on the market by the KICs and their partners. It shouldn't go all to the partners, but really it should be a win-win. So we help them and look at how they negotiate their commercial contracts with partners. And that will be all for my side. Just to say before we go to a question is, if you look at the proposal, I think all this is in great details in the chapter 2.2.10, which is page 12, which details why the need for functionality and what are the elements that are included in functionality. And also, as I mentioned, I think in my earlier slide, that in the technical evaluation of your proposals, the functionality has a great number of points. So it's important that you plan, you explain how you're planning to achieve these revenues, these co-funding, the financial asset, all the aspects that are needed to be included in the proposal, because this will be evaluated carefully by the governing board of the EIT. So now I'm open for questions. So Katerina.
Thank you very much, Laurent. You have presented a very, very important topic. This is also a unique element, one of the unique elements actually, of the EIT innovation model. You briefly touched upon it at the end of your presentation, but I want to insist a bit more and share with us, with our participants, a few more details about how should the concept of financial sustainability be particularly included in the proposal.
I think consortia that are coming forward to send us a proposal have to reflect on these elements. They have to include good planning in terms of the planned revenues from the different categories of revenues, but also sources of financing. Increasingly, also the financial asset is an important issue for us for the mid to long-term financial stability of the KICs. So I think the planning has to be realistic, but also ambitious. And then it has to include all the elements and have some indication that also the partners that are coming together on the proposal have understood the concept financial stability and are ambitious, and they will show us that at the end of the 15-year period, the KIC will be still there, running activities, maintaining the ecosystem, and delivering on impact and results that have been promised with the means, the financial means that the KIC will have at that time, and also throughout the 15-year period.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurent. I see that there are already some questions for you. I'll ask for the patience of our participants and ask you to stay with us, sit back and relax, because we will call you back at the end of the discussion. So please continue asking questions. We'll be able to answer them at the end of the discussion. In the meantime, we want to share with you a video. So, here at the EIT, we really strive to create an ecosystem that really has the innovators at its heart. And to do this, we need you also to understand that you, as one of the future, let's say, participants in our knowledge and innovation communities, you will be actually contributing to this objective, to this proposal of the EIT. So it's always important when preparing your proposal to think why this community is coming together and who you will be creating activities for. And for this reason, we're actually, as part of this video series, prepared some videos that highlights, the creativity, the young creatives of Europe, and those people that are really making a difference in the fields of innovation. So today with us, and for the next video actually, we'll have Marnik Heiligen, who is a Belgian architect.
For us at Gestalt, the power of creativity is the freedom it provides to establish strong answers that embrace both function and feeling. Innovation is about finding sustainable answers that inspire use and reuse, making it possible to continue to build upon the history of European building culture. Inventing new shapes or ways of making shapes are in this sense totally irrelevant. Innovation for Gestalt means building in a more technical, sustainable way, making it possible for a continuity of the European building tradition. In that sense, our approach is the opposite of what is often considered as innovation within the architectural field, with buildings that result in extravagant shapes and a main purpose to look impressive and special.
Well, that was inspiring, and as you know, architecture is actually one of the 8 sectors that is covered through this particular call. So next with me, I will invite David Tas, who is the head of unit of the innovation communities, to join me. Let's see, David in the screen, please.
Yes.
Hi, David.
Hello.
Welcome.
Good morning.
So, David, with you, we will really dive deep into the details of the EIT contractual relations and the funding model. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katerina, and good morning to all the participants at this session. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, I will cover the EIT operation and funding model, as well as say some words about the contractual relations between the EIT and the innovation communities. I will have 4 slides altogether. So if we move to the next one, which is about the EIT operational model. So first point, I think it's important to remember that the innovation communities are institutionalized European partnerships. So what are these partnerships? This is a key implementation tool under Horizon Europe in the area of research and innovation. They have a long-term perspective in order to achieve significant impact, and there's a high degree of integration of the partners. This is not unique for the innovation communities. This is the same for all the partnerships. But why I am highlighting this, because there's a common set of rules and criteria laid down in Horizon Europe. And as you surely know, EIT is part of Horizon Europe. We are under Pillar 3, Innovative Europe. So for any potential applicant or interested party on our new kick call, it's very important to get familiarized with the standard Horizon Europe rules, including the rules on European partnerships. And for the EIT kicks, the main partners are higher education institutes on the one hand, research institutes, research organizations on the other hand, and the third part are the companies, including both large corporations and SMEs. So the EIT, the model is about integrating the knowledge triangle, bringing together the three sides who can work commonly on projects with the aim to achieve long-term impact. A very important feature is the continuous openness and transparency during implementation. I would mention this at two levels. So first of all, at the level of the partnership. A new innovation community is established with a certain number of partners. I know that there's a limitation, and the proposal stage is limited to 50 entities. However, later we expect an expansion, and the kick shall be open towards new parties. So anybody who could add value to the partnership should be able to exceed. And in terms of transparency, all the rules and regulations around association shall be transparent and shall be transparently available to all interested parties. And the other level I would like to mention here is about the projects and activities which are run by the innovation communities. So it's very important that the activities are selected through open calls. And then the portfolio of activities are managed in an open and transparent way during implementation. So it's a very important aspect again, and I would say this is the responsibility of the kick legal entity. I will speak about that later. And then the third point I would like to mention here is the compliance with the EIT's good governance principles, which is important, and I will not repeat because Adam already presented the good governance principles, but the innovation communities shall set up an efficient and cost-effective structure. They are composed of a legal entity and innovation hubs in different countries and regions. And as Adam explained, there shall be a clear decision-making structure, supervision function, executive function, balanced partnership, and so on and so forth. If we move to the next slide, which is about the funding model, this is foreseen in the EIT Strategic Innovation Agenda. This is our 7-year strategy adopted by the European Parliament and the Council last year, or actually beginning of this year. The objective with the funding model is to enhance impact and incentivize commitment from the partners and also different third parties. And there are 3 elements of the funding model. The first one is the gradual reduction of the EIT funding rate linked to the maturity of the innovation community. Laurent already explained on one of the slides the startup phase, ramp-up phase, maturity, and the whole financial sustainability objective is linked to that. And this is coupled with an EIT funding rate, which can be 100% at the beginning, but at the end of the life cycle of an innovation community, which is normally 15 years, it should decrease to a level of even to 20%. So there's a gradual decrease. And this is to incentivize the innovation community to achieve the financial sustainability goal by increasing the level of public and private investment. It can be from different sources, from the own sources of the partners participating in implementing the activities, but it can be other third parties, public or private funds can be involved. Then the second important element of the funding model is the performance-based funding, which Adam already introduced, and I will have my next slide will be a more detailed slide about the performance-based funding, so I will come back to that a little bit more in details. This is the funding, the EIT funding is linked to progress made by the innovation community. And then and I will come back to that, as I just mentioned. And the third element is the reinforced mechanism. Now, if you look into our strategy, this periodic reviews and continuous monitoring is very much emphasized in our strategy. This is the role of the EIT Governing Board, and this is the role of the EIT to carry out the reviews and monitorings, to apply any preventive measures, or if something went off track, we can of course apply corrective actions too. My colleague later, Eva, will explain a bit more about the mandatory reviews and evaluations during the life cycle of an innovation community. But important that this is also linked to funding, because there can be some stop or go decisions. Future funding can be conditional upon the outcome of certain reviews or monitorings. Okay, a couple of other important points is the alignment with Horizon Europe rules. As I mentioned, we are part of Horizon Europe. We believe that this is a simplification, because we are using a lot of Horizon Europe models. For example, I will speak about the grant agreements, but it's fully based. Our grant agreement is fully based on the Horizon Europe grant agreement. We are using a lot of Commission tools. In the future, we will use Commission IT tools for grant management. And also important that everything when it comes to operations, so for example, cost eligibility rules, control strategies, payment modalities, implementation mechanisms, we are aligned with Horizon Europe. So there is the annotated model grant agreement issued by DGRTD. These are the guiding rules and principles. So from that perspective, we are not different from another Horizon Europe program. Where we are different is these features that were mentioned today: governance, financial sustainability, knowledge sharing, integration, impacting the thematic field addressed by the innovation community. And my last point is about the grants, about multi-annual grants. In the past, we had annual grants. In the future, we are already converting to multi-annual grants. Still, there will be an annual funding mechanism and an annual review embedded in the process. Also, as Adam mentioned, EIT has an annual budget, so the granting to the KIC has to be synchronized with that. Nevertheless, we will, in order to ensure longer term perspective and legal security, we will sign multi-annual grant agreements. And if we go to the next slide, a little bit, it's worth to zoom in to the performance-based funding. I think it's important to understand already at this stage, the funding allocation criteria is laid down, is decided by our EIT Governing Board, and then it is applied by the EIT and the Governing Board during the funding allocation process, and it takes into account different elements. The first element is about the multi-annual strategy, and this is where our Governing Board has a very important role through, as Adam already mentioned, we have Governing Board rapporteurs appointed, which follow up certain innovation committees or groups, waves of innovation committees during the year, how the innovation committees are progressing in view of strategic element, in view of strategic recommendations. We also have the hearings. Next week, for example, we will have the hearings with the current 8 KICs in view of the 2022 funding allocation. So this is like a pitch, a long pitch, I would say. This is an important part of the review of the multi-annual implementation. Then we have quite some elements which are looking into past performance based on previous reports and monitoring activities. Very important one is the financial sustainability, what Laurent explained at the previous session. But this matters, this counts very much, the progress towards financial sustainability when it comes to funding. There's a direct link between the progress of the innovation committee towards the financial sustainability and the perspective for future funding. Then the next point or next points are linked to knowledge sharing integration and financial performance. We have some key performance indicators included in the impact framework, which will be explained later by my colleague. We have an impact framework adopted by our Governing Board, measuring the short, medium, and long-term impact. And innovation committees have to report on the progress against these indicators. And again, these have direct impact implications in terms of future funding. Then we are taking into account also some non-financial elements like the diversity, compliance with branding rules. On the financial performance, it's about the absorption. These are financial parameters, error rate, compliance, grant absorption. And last but not at least, every year, or if it's a multi-annual grant agreement, then every 2 or 3 years, the innovation committees have to submit business plans, so future plans. We take into account future prospects, which is assessed in terms of excellence, impact, as well as quality and efficiency of implementation, like for any Horizon Europe proposals. But this also matters, this also counts in the funding allocation. So this is a fully performance-based system. There is a strong link to the impact framework, strong link to financial sustainability, excellence. So all the important features of the model are appearing in this performance-based allocation mechanism. And last but not at least, we have some earmarked funds, earmarked grants for certain strategically important topics. They are foreseen again in the strategic innovation agenda. So if you read through our strategic innovation agenda, you will see these topics and the earmarked allocations for the EIT regional innovation scheme. So this is a scheme which is targeting moderate and modest innovators, regions and countries. And there is a foreseen 10 to 15% of the EIT funding for the next 7 years, 21-27. Then another important area where we have earmarked allocations, it's about joint EIT community activities. We call them cross-kick activities and shared services. Here we have indicatively 7% set aside for the 21-27 period. And we have the EIT Higher Education Initiative pilot, which was launched actually this year. And here for the first 3 years, 21-23, we have 3% of our 7 years budget foreseen. However, this might continue based on a review and positive decision. And if we move to my next slide, which will be also my last slide, this is about the contractual relations. So how I was speaking about funding allocation, about grants and grant amounts and earmarked allocations, how this is contractualized. I will explain that through this slide. So as you surely know, a new innovation community is selected through a call for proposals. So as a response of our call, which we launched on the 26th of October, we hope that we will receive a lot of good proposals. There will be a whole assessment process and then a designation next June. There is no agreement signed until then. And then the first agreement, which we are signing with the winning consortium, will be a startup grant agreement for a startup period, which is 1 year. This time it might be a little bit longer. So we expect that this will run until the end of 2023. And there will be a dedicated grant, 4 to 6 million euros indicatively, which will be awarded to the winning consortium with a specific objective to get legally ready, operation ready, and set up a new innovation community, and also to sign a partnership agreement. So this is a good bridge to my next point, which is the partnership agreement. So after the startup phase, at the end of the startup phase, we expect to sign a partnership agreement with the new innovation committee. So this is signed between the innovation committee represented by the KIC legal entity on the one side, on the other side, the EIT represented by the EIT director. And the partnership agreement lays down the long-term cooperation between the parties, and it includes all the important principles like good governance, financial sustainability is referred to. There's a very strong link to the strategic innovation agenda of the EIT, and this is signed for an initial period of 7 years. And it can be extended for another 7 years. Eva will explain that better. My colleague will explain that better at the next session, because again, here is a typical stop and go decision. There should be a review, and if the outcome is positive, then it can be extended. So this is the long-term agreement, the partnership agreement. Very important that there is no grant, no funding coming automatically with the partnership agreement, but this is a precondition the partnership agreement is the precondition to give any kind of funding. And the instrument to provide grant to the innovation community is the grant agreement. Again, this is signed between the EIT and the KIC legal entity. As I mentioned already, this is based on the Horizon Europe model. So even if you go on the internet, you will find the model, but I think the partnership agreement as well as the grant agreement model was included in our call package. There is one specific annex of the grant agreement which describes some specific features of the EIT model. Otherwise, it's the same multi-beneficiary agreement as for any other action grants under Horizon Europe. Very important part of the grant agreement is the business plan and budget that I referred to already. So this is something which is submitted by the innovation community. We start to converge to multi-annual business plans, and we will look into the portfolio of activities described in the business plan. We are assessing very much the mechanism of project selection by the innovation committees, management and control system, portfolio management, and so on. If there is a multi-annual grant agreement, then we will have amendments inbuilt during implementation. And also there are some reporting obligations. So against this plan, the innovation committees will have to report through interim and final reports. And then last but not at least, it is equally important that the innovation committees are autonomous, as we mentioned, to select the partners and the activities, of course, within the boundaries, staying within the principles that we are presenting today. And this relationship is regulated through internal arrangements. For purpose, we are using this word arrangements because it can be a contract, it can be an agreement, it can be any other type of instrument. This is very much up to the innovation community, how you regulate legally speaking, the relationship between you and the different entities participating in the decision making or in the implementation of the activities. And the EIT, of course, will continuously monitor the projects, the individual projects during implementation. We'll continuously monitor how the innovation committees is managing these projects. And who are participating on the slide on the left-hand side, you can see the KIC partners are acceding to the KIC, but there are also a lot of third parties. Recipients of financial support to third party, international third parties, associated partners, and so on. Again, the KIC is free to define the different partnership categories. So I will stop here and the floor is open for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. For now, the floor is open only for one question that will come from my end, but I see that there are already quite a lot of questions in our chat, and thank you to our participants. So you mentioned that actually the KIC legal entity is the one representing the entire partnership. So I wanted to ask a few more details about how the relationship between the partnership and the legal entity actually looks like.
Yeah, indeed. So the legal entity is I would say, the sole representative of the whole partnership towards the EIT. So any contracts between the EIT and the KIC are signed by the legal entity. And then, of course, the partnership for a mature KIC, it's 150, 200 partners. So it's very important, first of all, to set up solid internal governance rules and systems. Each KIC depending on the legal form. There are some bylaws or other types of agreements which is regulating this relationship. So whoever exceeds to the partnership signs up, if I may say so, to these bylaws. And for the projects, because of course there's a lot of funding involved, and the innovation committees, the legal entities are granting or re-granting funds to the projects. There are typically project agreements signed, but there can be also sub-granting, so sub-granting financial support to third party. This is a quite common scheme under Horizon Europe projects. Then there are sub-grant agreements signed. There are different types of agreements. Again, this is up to the KIC how they define the agreements, but it's very important that the elements from the Horizon Europe, from the EIT legal framework are transposed to the level of the final beneficiaries.
Thank you very much. So in general, we do follow the rules of Horizon Europe, but it's totally up to the KIC, to the legal entity, and to the new partnership for this particular call to decide how these contractual relationships will look like.
Absolutely. When it comes to implementation, it's up to the KIC. However, again, I would like to repeat myself that all these principles which we are presenting today, good governance, financial sustainability, openness, transparency, must be complied with. So the KIC has to find the right instruments to be able to comply with all these principles.
Great. Thank you very much, David. So you stay with us for the end and the Q&A session. And I'll invite Manuel Irun Molina, who is the head of section of the Innovation Communities Management section, to join us and talk to us about something extremely important, which is the EIT Grant Lifecycle. So Manuel.
Good morning, Katerina, and good morning to all the participants. I'm also sharing the presentation. Hopefully it's in your screen already.
You just put it in the presentation mode, Manuel?
Yeah, here you are.
Perfect. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Katerina, again, and thanks, colleagues. I will build now in what David was just mentioning on how, let's say, the operational model and the funding model of the EIT looks like, and go in a bit more, let's say, seeing this from a practical perspective. So how this looks like from the EIT side and the KIC side once, in a way, you are in the flow of the operational flow of the KIC. So in brief, I have 3 slides to share with you all. In this first one is just sharing a bit which are the main elements of this operational flow and the grant life cycle. As David was mentioning before, so we are building based on business plans, and you should expect that we are producing, we are launching this annual or biannual now, multi-annual call for business plans and guidelines. So we are in a way informing what we are expecting from this call to the potential beneficiaries, in this case, the different KICs. And this is very much based on Horizon Europe templates. So this is also how my colleagues presented before. As I said, then is the time of the KICs to react to this call, preparing their business plans in multi-annual basis, and reacting to a deadline to propose these business plans to us. Also, it was mentioned by David before, so you should also be aware we are in transition to European Commission tools for submission, evaluation, grant agreement signature amendments, and reporting. So here probably an important message, exactly as it was raised before, is relevant that the KICs, they build capacities in their management or operational teams around familiarity with European programs management, and this helps in a way with all the operational flow that we are presenting. An important milestone is the submission of the business plan, and you will see that also for new KICs is one of the relevant milestones in the startup grant agreement. So this comes in the very first year of the setting up the KIC, because it's in a way how the new KIC will prepare the business plan for the years to come. How this, in a way, is processed towards the EIT is through, let's say, the EIT funding allocation process that my colleagues Adam and David presented. It's already mentioned the importance of the hearings in front of our governing board, and in that moment, based on the performance-based funding elements that David presented, comes the decision of the governing board allocating the annual funding to the KIC. At the end of the day, how this is translated in practice is that we need to sign this multi-annual grant agreement with the KICs, and this is in a way the moment where we are with all the elements to release the pre-financing of the EIT grant allocated to a particular KIC. So it's the moment where the first payment from the EIT is reaching the KIC legal entity, and from there we initiate the implementation of the activity. What happens during the implementation? It was mentioned several times from different perspectives, but here is also listed as one important element is the continuous monitoring of this implementation from different angles. So you have from the strategic angle, and Adam mentioned the GB rapporteurs as one key aspect that is very much linked to the follow-up of the strategic recommendations from our board, but also from the operations. And this is very much captured in our monitoring plans between the EIT and the KICs. In a way, it's also relevant that the KIC understand that the grant cycle also embeds the grant reporting, interim and final, and it's only after the final payment, after the final revision of the grant is when the EIT releases the payment of the balance. So against the pre-financing, but also against the different elements that may trigger underperformance or breach of the different obligations. And the last element of this EIT grant life cycle, but also very relevant, is the grant assurance. And I have a slide to share with you, which are the main building blocks around this element. Okay, moving forward, if this slide tries to put this a bit more in the annual basis and to be a bit more comprehensive for you to understand how the flow of the EIT grant cycle works. So if you see in a typical year from the KIC perspective is that once we have launched the EIT invitation for submitting the business plan and in a way set the criteria for funding, is the time for preparation. So it's the time when the KIC launches their own calls to invite their community, their partners and other actors outside of the partnership to react towards the different challenges based on their own KIC strategic agenda. This typically happens our launch in the Q1 of a running year. So you have 2 quarters of the year, the KICs have 2 quarters of the year to build together the portfolio of activities and to submit the business plan in the Q3 of a natural year. What comes next is that is the time of the EIT to assess and to decide on the amount of EIT funding based on the different principles and basis that we have been explaining before. So in that moment is where we are in practice ready to finalize with the KIC the different business plan and to sign, to conclude the signature of the specific grant agreement of the multi-annual grant agreement. Is when implementation starts. So it's, as David presented, currently in 1 year basis, but we are moving to multi-annual. So you should understand this second line in the slide as a multi-annual possibility with different years of implementation. The first thing is, of course, the pre-financing. Once this grant agreement has been signed from both sides, and it starts, let's say, the implementation and the continuous monitoring. Where, in a way, we are working very closely together with the KICs, also understanding what is the different activities they are implementing, what are the different adaptations and mitigations of the different elements that may raise during the implementation. In this time is when amendments may happen, but also interim reporting to understand the progress and further payments if necessary to increase the pre-financing based on the multi-annuality. The last cycle, or the last part of the grant cycle, is this reporting. So usually, typically, is in the first quarter of the year after the finalization of the implementation, where the KICs are asked to submit their report, their final report, and there is when the EIT, based on the different criteria of the performance-based funding that David also mentioned, assesses what has been the level of performance, but also the alignment with the different obligations set from the partnership agreement and the grant agreement itself. With this, the EIT is in a position, after concluding with the KIC, to release the final grant balance of the payment. But the flow doesn't finalize in that moment because there is also the possibility of a post-audit of the report, and this is a building block of our grant assurance model itself. And this is what I'm presenting in my last slide, just to give you the full picture of how this look like in practice. So these are the building blocks of the grant assurance. So starting with the warranties in the legal framework that it has been presented by my colleagues. You should expect as well guidance provided to the KICs. So the preparation of the grant assurance flow, but as I said, continuously during the implementation of the grant. This, together with continuous monitoring that happens with different actions set up and defined for a particular KIC. Following up with ex-ante verifications. So this happens during the different assessment of the reports. And as I presented before, the last step in the process, this ex-post audits for, let's say, assuring that the grant is in the quality and the level of protection as necessary. So I will end here my presentation, Katerina, and remain, of course, available for further questions and clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Thanks a lot for the clear description of the EIT grant lifecycle. But I have a very, very particular question for you, which I'm sure that will be also very interesting for our participants. So from the date of designation of the new consortium, when should the new KIC, so partnership, expect to start receiving funding from the EIT? So there will be 1 year of the startup phase, let's say, and then they will join the usual, let's say, EIT grant cycle. So when does the money come?
Thank you very much, Katerina, for the question. Indeed, you just mentioned there is, in the moment that a KIC is designated, there is the startup grant that follows. So this is based on the lessons learned from previous designations, is seen as a multi-participant grant necessary to, let's say, bring the KIC up to speed from legal readiness, operational readiness, but also from the perspective of the EIT branding and the first activities of the KIC itself. So in the moment that this first startup grant agreement is signed, then initial pre-financing for this initial year is released. So this is brought in front of the activities and in the percentage that we consider sufficient to bring, let's say, the operations up to speed, as I mentioned. So this particular year is critical because then, as I mentioned as well during my presentation, there is these milestones to prepare the first business plan with the full operation. And probably participants are a bit more interested, based on your question as well, on when the first payment comes after this business plan preparation. So in the moment that the KIC submits, in practice, by the end of September, usually their business plan. Once we have the assessment done and the funding allocated by our governing board, usually at the end of November, beginning of December, then the signature of the grant, the specific grant agreement or multi-annual grant agreement happens early in the next year. And this is the moment where the first pre-financing payment is done from the EIT bank account to the KIC legal entity bank account. So on the percentage that, again, we consider based on the funded allocated to the KIC, that allows the KIC activity to start from the different angles of the business plan. From there is when, based on what David presented, the contractual relations, not only from our side to the KIC, but also from the KIC to the different partners, where the funding flows to make sure that the different actors are with the capacities to start the business plan activities as well.
Thank you very much. So as of the beginning of the year, the funding has flown actually to the accounts of the new KIC, and then it starts flowing actually to the partners, correct?
Exactly, this is correct, but always with the provisions, of course, that the specific grant agreement is signed. That this means that the business plan is in shape and format, following the different elements to ensure the possibility of our release of the pre-financing.
Okay, thank you very much. So same with the other colleagues, please stay with us. We are about to have our last presentation for the day, which is about the EIT impact framework. Well, at the end of the day, whatever we do, all the activities we do are all about the impact that we create as an EIT community. So I will invite Eva Tanasova, head of the strategy section here at the EIT, to present us the new impact model.
Thank you very much, Katerina, and good morning to all. As my colleagues outlined, impact is critically important for us. So I'll present our impact model, what we mean by impact, how we measure it, but also how you should plan for impact in your application for a new innovation community in cultural and creative industries. So this diagram is a simplistic overview of the impact pathways created by the innovation communities we support. Naturally, it starts by employing the necessary resources like the human, material, financial resources, and the impact pathway at the end leads to creating financially sustainable innovation ecosystem that addresses major societal challenges in Europe and globally. The initial stage of this impact chain is the establishment of a knowledge innovation community. And here, when you approach the development of your concept, of your proposal for a new innovation community, you have to ensure that you engage the right partners from all the critical areas, the business, research, innovation, education. Another important aspect here, this level of the proposal stage, is also to ensure a proper balance among the countries, the member states and other eligible countries to be involved in the knowledge innovation community, and also to assign and plan a prominent role for partners from countries which are part of the regional innovation scheme, the so-called moderate and modest innovator countries. The ultimate goal of all the activities that you can see in the middle of the diagram, the activities that the knowledge innovation community are delivering. So the goal is to achieve a three-dimensional systemic impact that are part of the diagram: economic, societal, and educational. And I'll explain in a second what we mean by this. As we are part of the Horizon Europe program, we are contributing to 4 of its key impact pathways. You can see them listed in the first column of the table. And we expect a new innovation community in cultural and creative industries obviously to contribute to the same impact pathways. The first one, addressing new policy priorities through research and innovation, is directly linked to the main goal of the KICs to develop effective solutions to specific societal challenges. And then the other 3 are part of the impact pathways related to economic impact, innovation, and technological impact, which are namely these are generating innovation-based growth, creating more and better jobs, and leveraging investment in research and innovation. So what we mean by impact? The first layer we target is the economic impact, and here the new innovation community should plan for, and subsequently we are going to measure the revenues from the companies established by the innovation community, the number of jobs created, as well as the establishment of a financially sustainable innovation ecosystem in cultural and creative industries. The societal impact is directly linked to the societal challenge addressed by the innovation communities. And here you can see some examples of the impacts created by the KIC in climate change, in energy, food, and health. And finally, in terms of the educational impact, what we're looking for is for high employment of the graduates from our educational programs, also an enhanced, reinforced capacity of the higher education, and the integration of the universities into the innovation ecosystems. So how the impact pathway looks for each of the core business areas of our innovation communities. At the initial stage of the innovation impact chain, we create innovative products, services. These are developed, designed, tested, potentially intellectual property rights are obtained. And then at a later stage, we measure the number of innovations launched on the market, and we also measure their revenue. Then in the longer term, we're looking at the revenue generated by these innovations, as well as the societal benefits they offer to the client, to the customers, to the market. So similarly, in terms of the business creation impact pathway, at an initial stage, innovation communities support entrepreneurs to create businesses, and respectively, we measure the numbers of these startups created, number of startups supported. And then in the medium and longer run, we are looking for the sustainability of the startups. So we measure whether the startups are still on the market 3 years after the innovation community support ceased. We also are measuring at impact level the revenue generated by the startups, the number of jobs created, the innovations which are developed by the startups, and their societal benefits. And finally, in terms of the education impact chain, at initial stage, we develop education programs with strong entrepreneurial component. And here it will be important for you to really target an ambitious number of graduates from these programs. We also measure the learning outcomes of the graduates in terms of the entrepreneurship skills and competencies they develop to innovate and address societal challenges. We track the graduates in terms of their employment, in terms of whether they create startups, because it's a good way to materialize the entrepreneurship skills. And also we follow up on the startups, whether they grow, whether they generate new jobs, the income they generate, etc. So this impact model I described is further translated into the impact framework already mentioned by my colleagues. This is a document which describes in detail how we measure the progress against the impact pathways with specific key performance indicators in a short, medium, and long term. It also includes definitions for each of these KPIs. So it will be useful to consult this document before approaching the development of your proposal. It will be needed for several important functions, and I'll explain in a minute. You can find the link to this document at the very end of the call text when there is a reference to the important documents. We use the impact framework for three important functions. The first one is the impact-led planning, already mentioned by Adam. Basically, this is the top part of this diagram, or strategic alignment. And in the application, in the proposal template for innovation community in cultural creative industries, part of this call package, you will find this table where you have to combine your strategy, future strategy of the innovation community, and the expected impact. So basically, as an outcome of the strategic analysis of the societal challenge and the particular issues you want to tackle with the new KIC, you have to define your strategic objectives, and also you have to define your societal and economic impacts to be achieved by 2030, together with KPIs and also clear targets for 2030. 2030 is the last year of a potentially signed partnership agreement. Here, you can take the economic impacts from the impact framework, including the KPIs, but we have to assign targets for them. And then in terms of the societal impacts, you have to determine yourself as part of your proposal. And as you know, this is part of one of the evaluation criteria for assessing the proposals related to impact. There are two more functions for which we use the impact framework, already mentioned by my colleagues, and this is the top part of the diagram. We use the impact framework for monitoring and evaluations, because the data is collected against the KPIs in the framework, and this is the basis for the ongoing monitoring and the periodic evaluations. And the third function of the impact framework is the performance-based funding, already explained by the colleagues. In your application, again, the proposal template, which is part B, there is a table, I think table 2, again, directly linked to the impact framework. In this table, you have to plan targets for every year of the partnership agreement, the whole 7-year period starting in 2024 for the listed KPIs. In order to understand these key performance indicators, it would be good to look at the definitions in the impact framework first. On this table, the first column is our coding system. You do not need to touch it, ignore it, and then you can focus on the rest of the table and assign ambitious but realistic targets. And finally, a few words about the evaluations we perform. According to our strategy, particularly the EIT regulation, we conduct a 3-year interim reviews about the innovation communities, which cover the first 3 years of the partnership agreements. And then a 7-year comprehensive assessment, obviously covering the whole 7-year period of the partnership agreement. If the evaluation outcomes are positive, it is possible to sign up and to go for another 7-year partnership agreement. And then this cycle of 3 interim reviews and evaluations is repeated. Our legislation is explicit in terms of the evaluation criteria, but briefly and mainly they're focused on measuring, assessing the achievement of the KIC strategic goals, those goals which you put in your application. So it's quite important to define SMART objectives in your application, because 7 years later, we are going to measure your performance and your achievement against these initially agreed objectives. Another focus is, of course, evaluating impact through the key performance indicators I mentioned, also assessing the openness of the innovation communities to new partners, and of course, very importantly, measuring the financial sustainability. Well, if there are some concerns in some areas of improvement, obviously these evaluations and reviews will end up with recommendations for improving. But the ultimate goal of the evaluation is to make sure that the KICs are on the right track. They're doing really very good progress. And in 15-year period, there will be absolute success in terms of achieving all their strategic objectives, creating visible, tangible economic impact, and also tangible societal benefits, and evolving into financially sustainable innovation ecosystems. Thank you very much for the attention, and I'll stay for any questions.
And we start one question, Eva. Thanks a lot for your presentation. So my question to you is, how will the targets that will be put in the proposal from the potential applicants that we have here today will actually be used in the monitoring of the knowledge and innovation community?
Yeah, it's a good question. The targets in the application will be really important for us because this will be the baseline for the future monitoring and evaluation. And I'll explain what I mean by this. For every year, you have to plan targets for certain key performance indicators listed in the application. And then when there is a 3-year review or 7-year review, we'll compare what is achieved against the same KPIs with the data, with the targets you already put in your application. So this means that you have to be really ambitious when putting the targets, when deciding on the targets for the key performance indicators, and at the same time realistic, because the ambitiousness will be assessed as part of the evaluation criteria for impact, but also the target should be really smart. The same goes for the monitoring. When annually we collect the data to see, to measure the performance of the KIC, these are compared with the baseline data, which is already part of your application. Namely the targets for each year for the key performance indicators.
Okay, thank you very much. So from what you said, what I will highlight here is that our candidates or potential applicants should find a fine balance between ambition, but also being realistic in what they propose.
Yes, well, they should be smart. They should be specific, they should be ambitious, and they should be realistic.
Okay, great. So please stay with us, and I'll invite all colleagues to join me because we're about to start with a Q&A session. So please be prepared because we already have a series of questions. And by the way, for our participants, please continue asking. We do have around 20 minutes coming. So I will start with Adam. So Adam, first question is for you. And the question is, what happens if a KIC does not succeed to be financially sustainable after a long time? What are the next steps or options, let's say?
Yes, so that's actually an excellent question, and I'm happy that I'm able to clarify that. So first, let's define that long term. So the long term means 15 years. So according to the EIT model, the sort of main period of EIT financing provided to a KIC is 15 years. So that's really a long term. Then the second thing I want to mention that, I mean, the EIT will not just wake up after 15 years and realize that the KIC has not become financially sustainable, as I explained, and also the colleagues then went into more details, that we have continuous monitoring and also periodic evaluations in place. So we continuously follow and support the KIC, of course, along the journey. And then we also have this periodic evaluation. So first after 3 years, then after 7 years, then 10 years, then 15 years, as Eva has mentioned. So these are the points in time where we can take stock of progress made. And if, let's say, progress is not sufficient or a bit underperforming the expectations, then of course we will also increase kind of our support that we provide to the KIC to actually achieve those targets, to make sure that the KIC will become financially sustainable after 15 years. And one more thing that I want to mention is that the EIT Culture and Creativity will be in an excellent place because we have already 12 years of experience from the previous waves of KICs of what works and what does not work in terms of becoming financially sustainable, generating revenues. And we will, of course, share all of these learnings and good practices with the new KIC, and hopefully that will help them a lot in becoming financially sustainable. And the last thing I wanted to mention, maybe it's not fully clear yet, that already in the proposal and definitely in the so-called KIC strategic agenda, which is the 7-year plan for the KIC. The KIC will have to indicate certain revenue targets that they want to achieve in the upcoming 7 years, and then this will be the baseline against we will assess the progress made. So maybe that's just a technical comment to finish off my reply. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Okay, and we go on with our next question, which is for Laurent. So Laurent, can you please share with us whether there are any limitations to the activities provided to generate extra funds? And here we have the examples, for example, consulting, advisory services, etc.
No, actually, they aren't, and they are welcome. And existing KICs already do it. It's one of the lines of revenues they report against to us. Consulting and advisory, but also there are other sources of revenues and financing that they are allowed to go, and some of it can come from return on equity. So if they hold, for example, some shares in startup, scale up, or some kind of interest in projects, and this get funded further, they can exit and get some cash back. So that's allowed. They can also have other source of financing coming from other organizations, other EU program, national programs. So they also, that's allowed, and they report against it. Yeah, just maybe going back also on this comment, and then we indicated that the planning is very important. So we it's important to set smart targets, achieve those targets. Of course, we're very happy when overachievement occurs, but we are definitely not satisfied when it's underachieved, and then we do have corrective measures and so on. So it's important to the financial planning needs to be done well, and of course, diversification is very important, and it has an effect also on how the KICs build their organization, the type of people they employ. This commercial mindset is very important with partners, how to negotiate strong agreements to bring in revenues of all sorts, because it's really open. And just to finish, also the categories of revenues and financing are described in the legal basis of the EIT. They're also in the KIC's financial sustainability principles document that I think has been shared, or it's on the EIT website. It's also probably was shared as part of the call package. So it's there, but it's very broad, and everything is allowed. And again, good planning and diversification are very important.
Okay, so our invitation is for all of you to be creative and smart and realistic and ambitious. That's easy, right? Okay, let's go with the next question, which is for David. So David, we tried to reply to João, but I think we didn't do a very good job here. So we need your support. So João is from Portugal, and he's saying actually that he works in a museum, which is a non-profit and a public institution. So some of the criteria of financial sustainability plan don't really agree with the principles of this type of institutions. So can non-profit organizations actually be a partner of a KIC?
Thank you for the question. So maybe let's clarify first the partnership. Of course, any non-profit organization can be a member, as this is the case for the, if you look into the website of the existing KICs, you will see that there are a lot of not-for-profit organizations. They are even very much welcome and incentivized to join the innovation community. When it comes to financial sustainability, so financial sustainability doesn't mean that each and every institution or partner who is joining an innovation community shall become financially sustainable on its own. Of course, all the entities are working in a legal and regular environment according to the national laws. What we mean under the financial sustainability principle is that the partnership, the innovation community, shall become financially sustainable on the long term. So if we imagine a KIC after year 15, we expect that the legal the KIC, the legal entity, and the whole partnership can generate sufficient revenue streams from outside of the EIT to be able to continue with the knowledge sharing integration activities. Again, it doesn't mean that each and every activity shall or will become financially sustainable. It's about the partnership as a whole. On the other hand, we do believe that you should think a little bit out of the box, because we hear this many times that, okay, education activities can never be financially sustainable. We don't think that it's fully true. We believe that there are means to, to collect fees or to charge for the courses on the long term. I'm speaking about the long term. So at the beginning, what is important is that you put on the table a plan, a credible plan, how you would become financially sustainable, what are different revenue streams. For innovation projects, business creation, maybe it's a bit more straightforward with equity stakes, with return on investment schemes, and so on. So again, no, the EIT will not expect that a national museum in Portugal will become financially sustainable. This is not at that level. This is at the level of the partnership. I hope this clarifies.
Me too, but Joao, please let us know if that helped, and also to the other participants. Okay, so next question is for Eva. Eva, we have a question here about the societal impact and the evaluation that goes with it. So would it be advisable to delegate operations or challenges and KPIs to risk partners and hubs if the co-location centers are not in a risk area? So RISK, to remind to our participants, is the EIT Regional Innovation Scheme. So Eva.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, in my view, the risk partners should be absolutely equal partners to anybody else in the partnership and in the knowledge innovation community. Every partner can be responsible for achieving the targets of the key performance indicators or impacts, societal impacts, etc. The hubs are created in order to facilitate the engagement of the partners and also the activity and bringing the partners together in the same region. But the risk partner should have an equal role to all the other partners in the knowledge innovation community and equally responsible for meeting the targets and for creating the impact.
Thank you. And let me also stress here that countries and regions that are eligible under the Regional Innovation Scheme are just an extension of the EIT model, but they are strongly integrated to our community. There is no difference. So here we're talking about tapping that untapped potential, let's say, that might be in every different country and region across Europe. So from north to south, from west to east. So yeah, we're really counting on it. Thanks a lot, Eva. And we continue with another question for Manuel. So Manuel, this question is about the possibility or whether actually there is a need for financial contribution for university partners. And also, if so, what would be a typical annual contribution? I think this part actually refers to the fees in the partnership, but also in general to the cost that a university would have to bear.
Thank you very much, Katerina, and thanks the participant for the question. I think this builds on what David also mentioned on the partnership constitution. Indeed, the universities are typically partners in the KIC legal entities and participants in the activities itself. So based on that, if the question is about what is the average funding, this very much depends on the activity that a particular university will implement and how this organization is participating in the business plan itself. So there is no in a way limit or threshold. So it's very much based on current and actual cost based on the participation of this organization in the partnership. From your point of view of the fees of participating in the KIC and paying fees, this is also part of the governance that my colleague explained before. Is very much to the KIC to set what are the fees, annual fees to participate in the KIC, and what are the different typologies based on different profile of the participants. We have different models in different KICs, so this is also difficult to say what is the average there, but indeed applies for different kind of participants, including the universities. So my best reply to this question would be that it would be important to understand what is the role of this organization in the partnership itself, and what in a way needs to be contributed based on the KIC fees to participate, and on the other side related to the EIT grant, very much depending on what is the activity that the organization, in this case university, will deliver based on the business plan portfolio.
And Manu, if I may add, actually, I think this is one of the beauties of the EIT innovation model. There is no one size that fits all. So you will see, and participants can also look into our website, but also in the dedicated knowledge innovation communities websites to see the different types of partnerships, the different fees that they participate with, but also this very much depends on how they contribute to the activities and how these activities are set up within the year and in the long term. So yeah, again, be creative and you will be the experts of your particular challenge, which is about the cultural and creative sectors and industries. So you will be the best suited to know how you should approach this. Off to the next question, Laurent, we are back to you. And the question is whether there is any example of knowledge and innovation community investment fund apart from the EIT Health Venture Center of Excellence.
Yes, actually they are, and it's also developing. So indeed, there's the collaboration with EIF on the Venture Center of Excellence. It's an open innovation platform with a large amount of money that has been committed by partners of EIT Health and also EIF VCs and also the European Commission. So that's in place, and we'll start making the first investment in the coming months and then in the coming years. But we are on top of this going to build another compartment with again EIF, focusing more on agri-tech and bioeconomy. So that will be in place in a few years' time. Of course, it takes time to attract these large funds into the compartment with EIF and then make the investments, but that will come in line, I would say, in a few years' time. And then more importantly, then that's already open. It's a fund that EIT Food has set up. It's called Food Sparks. It's for now 30 million euro that can be invested in early stage innovative food type of startups. It's open for investment. It's been funded. The fund itself has the money inside, and yeah, and we have other communities that are thinking of developing other investment initiative or investment fund, and we follow that very closely. Obviously, there is a set of principles they have to follow to stay legal, regular, and also to make sure that this is there is a degree of independence in these the management of this fund, how the investment decisions are made, to make sure that the best startups, scale-ups are funded, and the KICs participate in one way or another. So yeah, this is very much in the making. We follow it very closely, obviously, for yeah, to make sure the impact and results are there, and also some financial stability coming back to the participating KICs in the form of fees and so on. So we welcome this, and yeah, it's a possibility, definitely.
Okay, and one more question for you. Thank you very much. So this is about the EIT Regional Innovation Scheme, and the question is, how does it work as an income-given activity?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because obviously we are talking about countries, modest and moderate innovators. There's a need to develop the capacity, innovation capacity in those countries. So we look at this maybe to keep it simple in two ways. One is the EIT risk activities themselves. So there, it's difficult to ask partners to co-fund significantly, but we still believe that these activities can if they do generate successful startups, successful project that can be funded later on, that can offer some return, those returns can go back to the KICs. So that can happen, and that will happen more and more. And then also, as part of the risk, we have these hubs, these offices that the KICs share, that are close to on the ground, the boots on the ground, as we say, in the regional innovation scheme countries. And those offices have obviously associated costs. We would like to see these offices stay there in the long term and have an impact. We EIT fund, let's say, the first few years through the regional innovation scheme, but we very much welcome the financing from other organizations that participate in these hubs, maybe at the local regional level, private funders. I mean, it's all open for discussion, and because again, we would like to see these hubs to be there in the long term and funded by other organizations besides the EIT.
And I see that Adam wants to complement.
Yes, if I may just add here, building on what Laurent has said, that indeed, the financing from other sources does not necessarily have to be private. I mean, you don't have to restrict your thinking, to return from equity and investments. Especially in the case of risk, it can very well be public funding as well from national or regional sources or schemes or programs. So of course, our aim is that the KIC builds such good programs, successful programs in these regions that are seen as beneficial by those regions and the nations, of course, because it helps increase their innovation capacity, link them to these pan-European innovation systems, and ultimately, hopefully, co-finance some of these activities from those sources. So this is a very valid route towards financial sustainability of such risk activities. And we already have some examples in KICs where indeed national or regional governments decided to co-finance some of the cost of these risk hubs or programs. So that's just an addition from my side.
Thank you very much, Adam. Indeed, and for a longer, let's say, more detailed discussion about synergies, you probably need to visit our last webinar, which is on the 7th of December, because there you will get also some ideas of how the synergies could work. We have time for around one more question, and I probably need to go back to Laurent. So it's 3 in 1, Laurent. So I want you to be quick and to the point. So the question is about, the first one is whether in the financial scheme, can interest rate returns be included as part of funding resource?
That's an interesting question. I don't think we have the case at all with any of the KICs. I mean, I don't see this as being very significant amount of money that could come back. I mean, the KICs don't have bonds or any sort of large financial instruments that could have significant interest rate returns coming back into their accounts. But I mean, it wouldn't be against the our principles and so on. But yeah, so it's open, but unlikely to happen.
Thank you very much. The second question is probably about the challenge of working at pan-European level. And the question is about how can we streamline locally different rules for taxation over services, goods, etc., provided or exchanged.
So here it's, due to the autonomy of the KICs, they do this already. They know how to do it. Obviously, there's a couple of jurisdictions in Europe where you can set up your legal entity as a KIC, and then from there you can do what you need to do. You have to remain legal. Obviously, KICs have legal and tax advisors, and they have to be very careful with the legal and tax laws in Belgium, in Germany, in France, everywhere. There are differences and nuances, and so anything is possible as long as you remain legal. And you consult your lawyers and your tax advisors. And for us, it's that's the main important part of this aspect.
Okay. And a very quick answer again, Laurent. So are cryptocurrencies part of the possibility for an investment scheme?
No, I think this is an interesting question. I mean, I know it's CCI, so yeah, we have to be creative, but no, I don't think we should expect any of this in any significant manner. I mean, let's see, the future might prove me wrong, but I don't think maybe develop some of those products as something you want to put on the market. That's for the KIC to decide anyway. It's not for us to decide if such and such product are viable or offering.
Well, I want to thank the speaker for the question. Actually, I really love seeing you guys being challenged to answer something like that. But this is exactly the idea. So we want a bottom-up approach. We want your proposals. You can make your case in the proposal about cryptocurrencies or whatever comes to your mind. We are here and we're looking forward to receiving it. So we're already plus 1 minute. I just want to check out in a nice way, one word as a tip from each one of you for our participants in view of drafting their proposal. For your particular points, what is the most important element? So Adam, I start with you.
Thank you, Katerina. So please, in your proposal, in terms of governance and management, propose a lean structure that complies with the principles that we have presented, and then you are set to go.
Thank you very much. So Laurent?
Yeah, so for my side on financial stability, I mean, be ambitious, realistic, and be smart about it.
Thank you. Now Eva doesn't have something to say, so needs to find something else. Good. David?
Okay, so one advice from my side. So please don't undermine the importance of operations to be able to deliver on the strategic goals. So to set up operationally and financially correctly the EIT from the beginning.
Thank you very much. Manu?
Thank you, Katerina. Building on what just David mentioned, the familiarity with European programming and management of EU funds. I think this is also an important tip to incorporate as soon as possible during the startup year of the designated cake.
And if I may add, always remembering this is not a standard Horizon Europe proposal. It takes a bit more than that. And Eva?
Plan for impact, economic, societal, educational, because this means planning for success.
Thank you very much. So we're wrapping up. We're at the end of our discussion. I want to thank all of you, of course, as speakers, all of you for the challenging questions. We love this type of questions. In a few days, you will find the recordings from this session, but also from the previous webinar, the slides from our presentation, but also an updated frequently asked questions page. If you think that you have even more questions coming, just send them to us. We will be updating all the FAQ part in our website. Reminder, next week on the 30th, we have the next webinar coming. It's about the EIT activities. The slide will remain open, so keep asking anything you want to ask. And well, I will actually see you again on the 7th of December in the final webinar. Thank you all very, very much. Have a very nice day. Stay safe and be inspired, because we really want to see a very interesting proposal coming. Bye-bye.